And it's just such a terrible thing to say to someone that their personality is disordered. Like, she might very well fall onto the kind of like, a category, but all it is just like a category of behaviors. But I don't think it's a useful way of looking at her struggles, because I think it decontextualizes them. Of course, she had a fear of rejection and abandonment, because she was repeatedly rejected and abandoned.
This is a podcast for Kel. That was Zev. Zev's someone that we haven't heard from before, but he's one of Kel's oldest and most loyal friends. Zev's views on Kel's treatment at the Nightingale is something we talk about in the inquest episodes.
Shame kind of like comes from just like, it's different from like guilt, how we feel about what we've done, whereas shame is kind of that real like core feeling that there's something kind of like wrong with us. And I think coming back to like psychiatry, and that's actually what it does to people, because you put a label on someone, and one of the core things that happens when you sit down with a psychiatrist, they'll say, okay, so what's wrong with you? I don't think there was anything wrong with her. I think there was a lot of wrong with what happened to her.
Zev says that the whole paradigm that we had about psychiatry, psychotherapy, what the mental health system could offer Kelly, he says that is what's at fault. He calls it the medicalization of distress.
My issue is with the biomedical model of psychiatry, the diagnosis and the drugs, and how we kind of just mystify it. You've got an individual person with a kind of illness without kind of looking at the social and cultural. And this is I think one of my big problems we have with how we deal with mental health and this is the mystification of it. We go, oh, it's an illness. Well, who deals with illnesses?
Yeah.
The doctors and the professionals, rather than, in that moment, she even says to me, just like, I don't want to be bombarded with questions. But she was obviously in a lot of distress and needed to signal that distress of how much pain that she was in.
In this supplement, Zev talks about the history of his relationship with Kel. He's someone else with whom Kel built a friendship of great intimacy and honesty. And I think that has to do with how they met. When did you meet him?
In 2009.
And how old so she would have been?
14.
So she was turning, and you were the same age, yeah?
Yeah, I was 15,
And where did you meet her? What were the circumstances?
in Simmons House, so in psychiatric, the adolescent psychiatric institution. So I know that she'd been admitted for self-harm due to kind of just family breakdown situation, and she did not want to be there. And after she came in, we got close immediately, and of just trying to survive just a really frightening, chaotic atmosphere that is, on one hand frightening and chaotic, but the other hand extremely kind of just regimented and dull. And it's a very specific feeling, kind of just being an adolescent and being kind of just completely discarded from society.
That's how you felt being in that place?
Yeah.
How long were you in there for?
6 months, 9 months.
Because she was only in for about
3 weeks.
Yeah, right, 3 weeks. So you'd already been there a while by the time she came?
Yeah.
And what was it? Why did you connect with her more than other people?
She was fun. There was a cheese toasty machine that she was very obsessed with, and we would just eat cheese toasties together. And she was how do you survive in here? This place is horrible. How she's I'm going crazy just being here. Just I need to get out of here.
What were the kind of things that would drive you crazy in there?
Absolutely kind of no personal autonomy. So you had people kind of just watching over you all the time. If you were kind of on one-to-one observations, they would follow you into the bathroom, and everything that you kind of said would be kind of just it's high levels of surveillance. And on one hand they even treat you like you're a infant, or you're kind of a responsible adult. There's no kind of in between.
Can you describe a little bit more about that?
So it's this thing of kind of just well, you have to take responsibility for your behavior, and it's just seen as completely irrational. So there's no kind of just understanding that people behaved the way they do as a kind of survival response. And then that on top of that, it's very regular human emotions are then pathologized.
E.g., what kind of things?
If you're kind of sad because you're in this environment, it's oh, you've got depression. If you're kind of just trying to like connect with the staff, you're just like attention seeking and dependent. If you're not trying to connect, if you're kind of just like want everyone to leave you alone, you're withdrawn and isolated.
Did she talk about why she was there or what had happened?
Yeah, that her mum was abusive, and then kind of just like a lot of things were kind of like going on, and she needed to kind of like get out of like the situation that she was in.
Do you remember what kind of language she might have used at that time? Would she have used a word like abusive?
She used the word neglect. Like mum didn't care. And also the word like hand control. And I remember kind of I've just been like, there's nowhere for me. I'm only here because there's nowhere else for me to go right now. There's nowhere else for me to be. But it's going to get sorted.
Zev kept returning to this question of autonomy, or the lack of it, when you're in an institution and being constantly monitored. He says that understanding the situation in those terms is crucial if we want to understand why Kelly behaved the way she did years later when she was in the Nightingale.
Just why she hated it so much, and
She hated what?
She hated kind of like the being in kind of a regimented kind of just like institution so much, because that's... Right. And this is another real problem with these places, that they end up kind of just like re-traumatizing, you kind of deal with whatever kind of like circumstances growing up, and then they kind of just like reiterate them. Because she didn't talk in the groups at all.
In the group therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well that never changed. When she was in the last place, she wouldn't go to group therapy. She went to one group therapy session and went on to loads of people about how much she hated it.
Yeah, she wouldn't do that, but she would come to me and talk about kind of what was going on. Mostly just like, I hate this place, I can't wait to get out. But just like, when we kind of like first met, that's why we complimented each other very much. So she would be the kind of person who would like get me kind of just like out and kind of like doing things, and then I would be the person she kind of like came to, and that was like very much our dynamic.
When Kelly got out of Simon's house though, she stayed in touch with Zev, and hearing him talk about the way she integrated him into a circle of friends is the way that a lot of people describe Cal, as someone who drew people from all kinds of environments together in a way that made them feel safe.
Kelly was always just like inviting me out with her friends. It wasn't like this, it wasn't necessarily kind of just like such a shameful kind of like part of kind of like her experience. Like she was like happy to be like, here are my kind of like other friends, like let's all go to the cinema, like let's just like welcome me.
My understanding was that she hadn't told her friends about where she was or where she was staying. Do you know if that's anything to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, we didn't necessarily say where we knew each other from, but she still, I don't know exactly, but she did come visit, like I said, we'd like, she'd invite me out to cinema, with her friends, or sometimes like to the park and stuff. And then she disappeared.
The reason, of course, that Kelly disappeared at the end of 2009 was because her mother had kept her out of circulation and prevented anybody from getting in touch with her. So when was the next time you heard from her?
When she was in Barbados. This was the next. And she was like, I hate it here. It's so boring. I'm so bored. And I was just like, because, she sent me kind of like pictures, and I was like, wow, that looks so beautiful. Like, I wish I was there. She was like, no, I hate it here. It's so boring. Everything is so slow. I miss the hustle and the bustle. I miss the city. I want to get out of here. But I was like, no, I mean, she did say that she was like happy to kind of like be with her grandma, and that her grandma is her mum. Oh, she said my grandma's my mum. Yeah. To you. Yeah. That's nice. Did you see her when she came over in 2012? When she was going to come immediately. Back? Tell me about that. One day in 2012, got a kind of just like Facebook event, Kel's home, and then she sent me a message. I'd really love to see you. Just like, please come to my party. Just remember kind of just like just being so kind of just like happy for her that she was back, and she, was excited to kind of like pursue her studies. She, I remember we'd like go to shows, there'd be house parties here. I just kind of like remember kind of like I didn't know anyone. So just
Right.
like, but everyone knew everyone because I just like known her from kind of like such a different point in her life, and then I was kind of like around like loads of people, and everyone just being like, why don't you talk, why don't you talk, why don't you talk, and me just like not knowing kind of just like how to talk to anyone, and just like from the outside it definitely seemed like things were alright. I know she definitely went through kind of like periods of like real lows, and she would like reach out to me, and she was also kind of like always one of my kind of like main support people who I would go to. We'd support each other. So I know she went through kind of like periods of real lows, but from the outside, yeah, you know, she was like in school and she worked so hard. She was driven. I remember kind of like being up there, and she had this whole like huge just like revision like schedule. I know she definitely had that kind of like dreams of, and she was just like, I need to get kind of like these grades, and she was like very serious about it.
Zev saw Kel quite a lot during the time that she was going out with James I.
She often opened up to me about what was going on, but I was always a safe person for her. She knew that I would never judge her, but I'd also just like understand, because we met in those like really horrific, and you know, I was never kind of like one of those people who'd be like, oh, you like break up. I would just be like, you know, that sounds really difficult. Just like, I'm sorry, you know, you deserve to kind of like be treated just like, you know, better. But I'd never be like, you should break up with him, because I think it can be really undignifying when someone's you know, puts down your choices. And I know kind of like, you know, if they were together, you know, there was a good reason. Like, I trusted her own autonomy, you know, to like make the choices that she thought was best for her.
For a time, Zev went to live in Canada, and he didn't see Kel again until the beginning of 2017, when they met in New York. From there, she'd go on down to Barbados to see Grandma Della and Aunt Rachel, and she'd tell Della about her relationship with James II.
I was like visiting a friend in New York, and she happened to kind of be there, and yeah, we'd always been in contact. There was never kind of just like a period where we just like weren't speaking. We went out for brunch, and then we went out to a bar later that evening, and so I knew that she had a much older boyfriend who was just like pretty well off. That he kind of just like worked a lot, they travelled a lot together. It was different because she had this kind of just like very kind of like high class mentality that was so different from kind of like how I remember. And you know, the kind of places that we went to eat were just like very bourgeois, like very kind of just like fancy. And then just like her whole kind of the way she carried herself, what we talked about in this very kind of just like high class like way.
Did you feel that was inauthentic?
No.
So how did you then account for it?
I mean, it's just a different, because she's always just like very, very cultured, but it was kind of just like, it kind of went from discussing like books and music to travel and fancy hotels and yeah, just like fancy food. And I remember like feeling like quite alienated, but I remember just being like happy for her. I'm like, yeah, this is the kind of life that she wants to live, and like I'm happy that.
Alienated from that world or alienated from her?
They're both.
Did you feel that there was something at core in her that had changed?
No.
Wasn't that?
No,
So it
no,
wasn't
no,
at that
no,
level.
no,
It was
no.
just, now she's into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, it was nothing kind of like, not an internal change, but kind of like an external change of like how she was presenting to the world. But then, yeah, when we met up a year later when I was back in the UK, things were kind of different again. Yeah, again, just like, the minute I got back to the UK, she was one of the first people kind of just like, that I saw, and at that time we were both having a really like horrific time.
When was this?
This was the end of 2017, and this is something she'd never kind of like mentioned before, and not something that, but she was talking a lot about social like anxiety, and she was kind of like anxiety that she had. This was new. You know, we tried to meet up. She'd be like, I can't. I'm too afraid to kind of like leave the house. And so when we were kind of like meeting up, there was no I'm kind of just like, you know, studying art school, and then her being just like, yes, I'm traveling, and it was just like we didn't have time for any of that. It was just very raw. Yeah, just talking very, very real about kind of our issues and kind of just like our pasts even. But she had some kind of just like new insights. You know, the link between just like how she felt then had to do with the things that had happened to her. When we talked about things, it was often kind of like, wasn't that kind of just like link. It'd be like, I don't know why I feel like this, or just like, I
In
should
the
feel
old
like
days,
this. Yeah. Because she knew that I was like in and out of like recovery and stuff, and I know that she kind of like had come to me being just like, maybe I kind of want to try one of those meetings that you go to.
On the 25th of Feb 2018, Kelly wrote to Zev telling him that she had a drinking problem.
She says that she really wants to chat, and that recently she's been forced to confront the issue that she has with alcohol, and that it's spiraling out of control, and she's starting to develop panic disorder and chronic avoidant behaviors because of fear of panic attacks. She's been sober for 5 days, and she can't imagine socializing with people outside of daytime activities. And then she says she kind of wants to change her way of thinking about alcohol, which she thinks is unhealthy, and that she's scared that she'd never be able to date again, go clubbing, and she didn't want to go to her friend's birthday because she couldn't conceive having fun without drinking. She just asks how I do it. Cal wanted people to think that she had it all together, and you know, and which is also kind of just like very much a common trait in addiction, where you put on lots of masks and you kind of present this idea that you're alright when you're not.
Given Zev's mistrust of psychiatry, I asked him if he'd been worried about Cal when he found out that she'd admitted herself to the Nightingale. Did you feel more worried that she was in there?
Yeah. It was complicated because it also didn't sound like she was like coerced into being there.
Right.
Like from what the conversations that I had with her right before, it sounded like she did want to be there. She was seeking help and support, or at least there was like some kind of like input from the kind of just like boyfriend. It was just like, my boyfriend thinks I need help,
Right.
and just like thinks I have like this disorder and that disorder.
Having quite a lot of interaction with her while she's at the Nightingale.
Yeah, we are.
In terms of her state of mind, the things that were bugging her, the things that were on her mind.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what's in those texts?
So she got in contact with me on the 10th of March to say that she's going to inpatient. And then I said, yeah, I just like told her to like call me and that I'd be happy to visit. And that just like, I saying that, just like I hope it works out, and I believe in her. I'd like started like planning this trip to go to like Finland, and then she was just like, great, I'm gonna come with you. She's like, oh, but you know, I'm in this, and this was when she was like in the institution, but she's like, oh, they might just like let me go, but I don't know, because you know, my boyfriend's like paying for this, and it's like a lot of money if I'm paying and then I'm not there. And I said, and I remember just, you know, being like, what if you, whatever kind of just like you think is kind of like right for you, I'd love for you to kind of just like, you know, we can just like hang out in Finland. And then kind of just like, you know, night before, she's just like, no, I don't think it's kind of like, because he's my ex ? Boyfriend.
When did she say that?
21st of March.
Right.
Okay, so I knew there was something kind of like in there.
But she hadn't told you before that she'd split up with him or anything like that. That was the first relationship status you heard.
Yeah. And she says she's essentially allowed to live a normal life. Their concern is what goes when I go home. I seem to unravel when left on my own devices, or don't have some kind of impulsive urge to do something. My therapist doesn't think it's a good idea for me to get rid of my room. But she says, yeah, like, I'll let you know by tomorrow morning. If James okays it, I'll book my ticket right away. So the doctor says it's not a good idea. James says like he doesn't mind. He doesn't have an opinion. Yeah, you know, this offer is kind of like open if you think it's a good idea for you, and if not, that's also okay. I think it's I didn't feel comfortable having a, I wasn't like, yeah, do it. And I wasn't like, no, I don't think it. I, again, just wanted to give her as much choice. Here we go. No worries. I want you to make the decision that's best for you. And this was... How do you see the date? Oh, here we go. This is 22nd of March. So we're just like talking about... Yeah, she's like talking about booking a hotel. And then she's like, I wonder if my hesitation to go ahead and pay is a bad sign. And then she says, I'll come back to you later this evening. And then she says, I'm going to bow out. I think anything longer than 2 days is too long. I don't trust myself right now. And then she kind of like, she apologizes, says, I'm sorry, I don't want to mess you around. And then she said that, yeah, she'd love to come to a meeting, like a 12-step meeting with me sometime. Yeah, that she has a lot on. And yeah, she just says, this is actually quite interesting. Of kind of like what's on her mind. She says, Sunday isn't going to work, but I could do any other day. I don't have a lot on. And then says, yeah, all the stuff I have to do, my career will get put on hold, and I'm in such a precarious place. I want to recover sooner than later. And that's the last thing she ever said to me.
Did you fear for her sanity in any of your interactions with her in her life? Did you feel that she was incompetent or not able to make decisions for herself?
No. Never.
One of the reasons that Zev had felt strongly about coming to speak on the podcast was because of the way Kel's struggles had been misrepresented to people after she died. For example, it's true that Kelly had struggled with alcohol, but it hadn't been as a result of a party lifestyle that she'd led, and it had happened right at the end of her life, a while after she'd moved out of here. But that aside, her difficulties had been emotional and psychological. But in terms of saying that she was drug addicted, as her mother made out, she had taken party drugs in her life, but she'd never developed an addictive relationship to them. She was on prescription medication for her last year, and I think there's a reasonable question to ask about how that affected her. In terms of party drugs, like coke or MDMA, she hardly ever seemed to take those at all.
But I think definitely this idea, just like that her mother put out that she was kind of like an addict in a specific kind of just like way, it wasn't. Because I remember reading some of those kind of like things that her mother wrote that
You mean after she died?
Yeah, that was kind of quite slanderous and...
To Kel?
Yeah. There's so many different ways to just like struggle with addiction. So many different faces of it.
And what were your struggles in your own life? They were with alcohol and were there was also, you said there were drugs as well?
Mm-hmm. Prescription medication.
Prescription medication.
Yeah, so like at this point in my life, I wasn't drinking at that point, but I was also tapering off of benzodiazepines. So I was kind of just like, so I wasn't drinking, but I was tapering off, so I was experiencing like profound withdrawal effects from that, but I was still, my lifestyle was kind of like, I was going to meetings and doing my best, but I took like benzodiazepines for kind of just like a couple years, and I took them as prescribed until I didn't, when I started kind of just like needing kind of just like more and more, and because my tolerance got high, and then one day the pharmacy just like made a mistake, and they were just like, oh, here's 300 pills, and just like then all of a sudden I was just like taking just like handfuls of them, and so yeah, and then I came back to the UK, and I had a major habit, and I called the drug services, and was like, and no rehab would take me because I was taking so many, so I had to withdraw kind of like slowly.
Right.
Addiction, when it comes to like prescription drugs, there's kind of like addiction like that, which is the compulsive use, but then there's also kind of like anyone who takes any psychotropic prescription drugs is dependent on them, because if you take them away, you'll have withdrawal effects. So, and there's debates whether or not they want to call that, if you want to call that addiction, because it's not, you don't necessarily have the same compulsivity as with like other addictions, but it's still, your body is still dependent on it.
When you say you don't have the same compulsivity, what do you mean?
Yeah, so if you take one, you don't immediately want to take another to get the same effect. But if you take, I guess, like 3 every day as prescribed, you're still, your body is, if you stop doing that, your body is going to go, and your mind, you're going to have this like severe withdrawal effects. And that's true for gabapentin, that's true for antipsychotics, that's true for antidepressants, but they've been painted as something that is like safe and non-addictive by the psychiatric community. I would have loved to have these conversations with Cal now that I kind of just like, once I kind of like discovered critical psychiatry. She would have absolutely loved all this. I can just imagine her kind of just like rage as she kind of just like, discovered that she was being lied to, and it wasn't a problem with her, but with kind of like what happened to her, and kind of just like that the ultimate problem is our experiences with power, in terms of, not having power and being disempowered, and the structures of power and how they play out in our lives. And I think, learning about what I've learned about psychiatry, just like I use the term psychiatric survivor to describe my experiences, and I kind of think a lot about, she doesn't get to like call herself, she'll never get to like call herself that, because she didn't survive psychiatry, These environments are not a safe place to talk about the very things that you want to open up about. And even like therapists, like that mandated kind of just like reporting, where kind of if they think you're kind of like a danger to yourself, then they can have this kind of like power to, which makes it not, you don't feel like you can open up about the things that you. So I wonder what it would have been like if she could talk like about, like, would have been, different if she could talk about that suicide ideation without the fear of punishment. So which is like, I know that sounds like the opposite to what we were kind of talking about. What if she had been more observation? Like, what if like kind of just like that? But what if she actually had that space to talk about suicidality without the fear of punishment? And this is actually just like, which may not be the kind of like right thing, but I have a rule of like, when my suicidal friends come to talk to me about things, just like I will, no matter kind of like what they say, I will not intervene. But I will not kind of just like, I would never kind of just like call the services. I'm not responsible for someone if they live or if they die, but I want to be that kind of like space for someone to be able to talk about it. And they're just like, okay, what about like the suicide lines and this, but how do we kind of just like create those environments? A lot of newer research, kind of trauma therapies, it's not actually about going back and reliving all those traumatic memories. It's actually about finding safety in the present.
Well, given that she reacted so badly, I mean, one of the main messages that comes out of the therapy notes and the stuff that she was saying to people in her last year was how she really didn't want to go and look at those memories, and how destabilizing she found them. And then she says this, everyone says that the only way of sorting these questions out is to go and look at the childhood problems. So I guess I'll do that, but I hate it and I don't want to do it. And that's where she's caught a month before she dies. She's going, I haven't got the strength for it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And it's around that she expresses the suicidal thoughts.
Because then you're left.
Then you're what?
You're just like left with it. Like, because if you kind of like bring all that stuff out, and then you kind of just like, it's not actually the best approach to kind of go relive all this kind of stuff. It's about finding that stability and safety in the present moment, and also just like my experience in those group therapies in those hospitals, it's really condescending.
Right.
She wasn't engaging because they're talking about her like, it's circle time and she's 5, they're like, they teach you, you're like 5, how are you feeling today? They either kind of, how are you feeling today? And it's very like touchy feet. It can be very like touchy feet, which
but also it's a very fragile approach.
Yeah.
It's so,
and all that and art, just like the way they kind of.
And where were you when she died? Well, how did you hear about it?
It was much later. I didn't find it until the court.
Oh.
So I was contacted to go to court.
And
I remember James first contacted me, and this was like afterwards through Facebook.
right.
And this was
And
just
it
like
was-
this was about the trial.
And that's how you heard about it.
And this was just in June. And this was so I was a month before I was going into. It's because I wasn't part of that kind of just like I was not the first person that people kind of like
Yeah.
came to about it, because I was not in that. Though we were always really close, I was not, because I was not part of her friend group. So no, I don't think anyone kind of like really had, not they kind of, it wasn't kind of like on them, but kind of mine, or until the court and then it was, I still have a lot of regret for kind of like not getting involved, but just like I had to process the grief, make sense of what was happening, and I was 1 month before going into rehab myself, and it was just like way too much, and it wasn't unusual for me and Cal to kind of like go a month or two without talking, and I think I was extra, and with what I was going through, I was extra not aware of kind of just like what was like. I was very in my own kind of like, time passed in strange ways. I was absolutely kind of just like heartbroken. I remember kind of just like where I was. I remember what happened. I remember just like I'd just gone to see Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds in Victoria Park, and then I got back and I had this message about kind of like, and it wasn't just, and it was with the assumption that I'd already heard, and I remember just like, yeah, first thing I did was just like put on Pixies. And you know, I dug out kind of just like, because I know the saddest thing, because I mean, you've seen that kind of picture of us when we were just like, yeah, we took that picture because we knew this might happen to kind of like one of us, and that because like one of our other friends had just like taken his life, and then we were just like hanging out because
Then
it was like,
Jordan.
yeah, we didn't always take pictures, but we kind of like, and there was something like very kind of like when we took that photo of just like we need to have photos together, because we were both kind of like scared, you know, we might lose one of the other ones, we might lose what.
When was that?
2012, 2013. No, it would have been the summer of 2013.
Of 13.
Yeah.
And where? So you had that photograph, and is that the only photo you've got with her?
Yeah.
And
I think, you know, there's like other kind of like photos of kind of like me in a group, or kind of that's the only picture we have like.
where was that picture taken? It looks like it's taken
Hampstead
on a...
Heath.
Oh, for some reason I look at it and I feel it's taken on a beach somewhere, but that's in my memory. I need to look at that picture.
I think it's by the pond, so
Right.
there might be like water in the background, but yeah, that's on Hampstead Heath. Yeah, just before I went to Montreal. And it was just like losing my old, like someone who'd been in my life since I was 14, which I don't have anyone who had always known.
Right. You don't have a lot of continuity with people in that time of your life.
Yeah,
Right.
and she'd always kind of like been there, and yeah.
Hey! Been trying to meet you. you go!